Hello and welcome to this episode of ET Studios being beamed straight from ETCISO Annual 2024 being organized in Vizag. My name is Muqbil Ahmar. I'm the executive editor at ETCISO and this session is powered by Jamf. The topic for today is trusted access and I have some very senior leaders from the domain of security who are joining me for this discussion. Let me introduce them. Himanshu Das CISO CRED, Sujeet Kumar DGM Security, PharmaEasy, Chiranjeev TK Country Manager Jamf. Now gentlemen, first of all, thanks for joining us for this wonderful discussion. Now before we move ahead with the discussion, let me lay down a few lines about the criticality of the subject that we have at hand. We all understand that there has been an exponential increase as far as cyber incidents are concerned. We get media reports about them every day. Now, one of the critical reasons why such incidents happen is because at some point or the other, access has been compromised. That is the way, that is the path that most hackers choose when they try to attack an organization. With these words, let's start the discussion right away. Going to you, Himanshu, first. So, today we live in a world which is very, very hybrid in the way we work. This was there, but after the pandemic came, things became even more flexible and employees want that freedom and flexibility, and particularly they have started working a lot on their mobile devices. So how do you really enhance productivity on one hand, which is very important, and also balance it with the need to have exceptional security? Because as I say, it's a very dispersed workforce that you have. Perimeters are simply dissolving.
First of all, thank you so much. Privileged to be part of this discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you for making me part. To start off with, today, if you look at the definition of employee, the definition of employee itself has changed, right? What I mean to say is the set of people who are there on your payroll, they are obviously called as an employee, but beyond that, there are a lot of other people, like there are interns, there are contractors, there are third parties. So all of these eventually becomes part of your company and they are considered as employee, right? So the definition of employee sort of has evolved over a period of time, right? And this has become very diverse, right? And one of the key thing that lies among all of them is the definition of 5 whys, right? What I mean to say is who, what, when, where, why. So if you start looking at this from a very fundamental principle and fundamental perspective, I think a lot of definition will be much clear, right? You'll be able to understand the model of security and the baseline that you would really want to sort of set up, right? So once you have answer to all of these, I think the fundamental guideline has to be to figure out what is the baseline security for me today, right? And what are the baseline security for my employees, right? And again, like I have bifurcated employees into multiple things: people who are there on my payroll, people who are there on my contract, there are some interns. So for all of them, the baseline will eventually differ at some point in time, right? So identifying baseline by answering those 5 why sort of becomes very, very crucial. And once you have identified that, then you move on to business context, right? And that business context will give you much more visibility on how do you make them more flexible while they are being hybrid, and either they are working out of office or while they are remote. Each of them would have their own business context, right? Maybe there's an intern in your company who may not want to have access to production data, but he or she would be working on some small term project. They may not really want to have a long term access to certain things, right? So the policy can be tuned accordingly for those set of people. Similarly, for someone who is not on your payroll and accessing your ecosystem outside of your company workplace and are remote, for them the policy or the baseline is going to differ, right? So all these deviation in baseline actually defines how people can actually be seamlessly accessing all the important critical data or critical information about your ecosystem, right, or your company altogether. So if you bring all of these into perspective, everything starts to stitch up, right? So you start with the baseline security, and over the period of time, you start to improvise, and you reach a maturity level, right? So over the period of time, you start with maturity level 0, and once you have reached the maturity level 1, you sort of get a sense of what these people really want and what are the context to business, right? Someone in the finance team may not want to have an access to, say, a microservice which is deployed in your ecosystem altogether. Similarly, a developer may not want to have an access to your finance data. So a lot of this business context actually gives you a flexibility of defining the baseline security model, right? So I would stick to identifying and defining this baseline security model. And this is what I have seen mostly, enterprise missing out on understanding what is the context of business and what is the baseline security model, right? So this is something which I have learned over a period of time here at my company, and this is how we have used basically Jamf also to, increase our maturity level. So I think this is on a high level my view on how do we basically think about employees and how do we enforce a flexible, a remote a workplace for all of these employees.
Thank you. That's a very elaborate response, and you have clearly delineated the diversity of workforce that we have presently, and how the objective of everything that we do is towards providing a seamless experience to your employees, your biggest assets. With these words, I would really want to bring Chiranjeev into the discussion. So, Chiranjeev, we have seen that there has been a lot of significant adoption as far as Apple devices are concerned. So, what do you think are some of the key drivers behind this shift, and how do these products differ from traditional devices? Also, keeping in mind that, referring to a very recent incident which happened a couple of months back, I would not want to go into the merits of it, but Apple was the only one which was unaffected or didn't have a lot of impact. Your views on that, Chiranjeev?
Yeah, I think we're getting into a stage where where it's a reality that many organizations, and I'm true for both the leaders here, would agree that it's a heterogeneous environment that we're getting into, and it would vary in terms of from a percentage perspective. If you look at a new age company in terms of which is going to probably hire a lot of millennials, and probably the founders who are also pretty young in terms of their approach and the culture that they want to kind of drive, are very clear that they don't want to kind of differentiate the experience what the employees have in their personal life compared to the experience they have at work. And that's where the huge shift that's happening, especially in the new age companies, in terms of adoption of devices like Apple. Uh, Vis-a-vis in terms of traditional companies, if you look at it in terms of be it different verticals, right? If you look at from an India perspective, obviously ITS is the biggest vertical that is there for us in terms from an export perspective, right? Where technology kind of comes in. This industry was also to a very large extent was driven by one single platform. That's changing as well, because today when it comes to development, you're looking at in terms of there is a very clear need in terms of having Apple as a platform which can the time to market for them is much shorter, so there's a very clear business need. So in this situation, I think there's a huge adoption across the band in terms of from a large enterprise to a new age company, irrespective of what size they are. And this also kind of brings in the aspect in terms of, as you mentioned in the earlier aspect of, the lines are getting blurred, right? And I would say majority of the organizations are keeping the experience part in mind, right? Which is so important, right? Because that will enhance productivity as well. And one of the big advantage that we see, because we largely focus on Apple, we've been doing that for the last 2 decades now, in terms of managing and securing Apple devices. And that's been a fantastic journey for us. And we see that huge growth that kind of coming in globally, and more so importantly in India as well.
Wow, those were excellent points, and I really believe, and I would agree with you on that point, that the lines between, personal experience and work experience are getting blurred, and there is a tendency to really take the game up a notch as far as providing superior experiences are concerned, whether it's an external customer or an internal customer like an employee. Now bringing in Sujeet into the discussions. Sujeet, we have all been discussing this, that we live in a very heterogeneous environment. What is your thought process when you choose a tool or a platform? And do you think we have the right tools and platforms to really integrate into Apple devices and ensure their safety and security?
Yes, of course. So when it comes to the tools selection, basically the heterogeneous uh, matters basically. Most of the tool they don't gel with each other, but few of the tools, of course, they have similar controls what they can provide to all the ecosystem endpoints. So in a similar way, having MDM, having EDR in place, so all these tools provide a unified features, unified simplicity, unified simplicity to use basically. So that is how we choose the tools when it comes to the selection of the tools itself.
Right. Excellent response coming from you, Sujit. Now, you come from an industry which deals with very sensitive data. You also come from the BFSI sector, both very sensitive industries as far as information and data is concerned. Now, we understand and we know that employees have access to a lot of very sensitive and confidential information on devices like their mobiles. Given the nature of their roles, do you think that there should be some kind of different level of security for normal employees versus more trusted people or senior executives? What is your view on all of that? And I would want a response from all three of you.
I'll go ahead. I think it's very clear that security is important, right? I think we are resting that particular question in terms of it's always been important, more so over now, where I just read a recent article that India has leapfrogged for the wrong reasons in terms of the number of cyber threats that are there in this region. And I think there are multiple platforms. I think it's not more a question in terms of which device, what OS, how latest is it. Threat is imminent, right? So threat is out there. There was a time where we would say that, threat is there, probably it will not happen to me. I think each one of us face that today in terms of the SMSs that we get, in terms of trying to kind of spam us, the emails that we get in terms of forcing us to click on a link, or the phone calls that we would get in terms of trying to scam us, right? So there are various types of threats that's out there, from simple phishing attack to a very sophisticated one. What we need to understand, and I'm just circling back in terms of the conversations that we've been having in the last couple of days here, I think the challenge that we have, okay, as from a region perspective, as also from India as an economy that's growing, obviously the geopolitics kind of plays a very crucial role. And the biggest aspect in terms of if the land needs to be threatened, obviously it's the economy which has been built on, which is the organizations, right? So which are sensitive, and these are not necessarily would have to be in terms of a government organizations. Today it can be largely in terms of private, and we have seen enough cases to kind of highlight that. So our thought process, again, my thought process and the organization thought process that I represent is that you need to kind of have a differentiated strategy when it comes to securing your devices and the information those executives carry. It could be a board member who could be getting into a crucial meeting before you're announcing your results for the quarter. It could be a merger and acquisition discussion that's going on, of information that's been passed. And just look at it, right? Again, uh, I think over the last 2 days, we've had, I think, over 150 security leaders here. How many times we've opened a laptop? We've been working, right? We've been doing everything on a phone. I'm not saying the laptop is safe, but as leaders as well, as you go higher up the ladder, we've seen that the things that you do on a mobile increases compared to what you do on a desktop or a laptop. So it's so crucial for you to kind of secure. There has to be a differentiated strategy for you to kind of go and probably, and that's why we focus as well. We have really sophisticated tools that can detect and prevent sophisticated attacks. I mean, I would probably not name those kind of softwares that are used, but in terms of where every information that's that can be taken on a phone, right from your conversations to your SMSs to your location and everything. So yeah, answering your question, absolutely yes, it's super essential.
Wonderful point. So, according to Chiranjeev, we need a differentiated strategy as far as various segments or groups of employees are concerned. And I also agree with you on that point that cybersecurity has become so critical, and we have seen such an exponential rise as far as cyber threats are concerned. Putting across a data point, so there is this World Economic Forum report which came out some time back. It said that the number of organizations who are low on cyber resilience is less than 50%, which is huge. I mean, if you were to look at the state of things, as you rightly said, they might be on the verge of. There is also another saying going on that you may not be aware, but you have already been breached. So, that is the kind of context and background and the criticality of cybersecurity that we see. Going on to Sujit, to you for your inputs on this very important question.
Yes, when we see the threat vectors basically, so the organization should have the fundamentals right basically. When we are trying to defend our network, so right from the IM basically, which has all the user creds and all the applications are integrated, all the devices which are integrated with the MDM devices. So your fundamentals has to be clear, basic, which can defend with all the threat vectors while also uh, safeguarding the data from the insider threats. So these are very important to have set right controls.
Great point. Stick to fundamentals, stick to your basics. Yes, Himanshu, I see that you have been smiling for a long time and now your turn has come.
Right. So yeah. So I think one of the key aspect that I want to add, right? So earlier I spoke about the baseline security. Um, so right now, what I think specifically for executives and for rest of the employees also is right understanding what are non-negotiables. Right. So that becomes very very important. Once you have identified all your non-negotiables, going ahead and taking your foot down and saying that I'm going to implement this and I'm taking a hard call. This is sort of a cultural requirement that is required right now, right? Wherein you say that I'm going to disable a USB from all the devices, and this is a larger call which you along with your executive has to sign up for, and this is a big cultural shift, right? And once you have identified all your non-negotiables like this, I think then your fundamental, as Sudhit mentioned, is sorted, right? So next thing is understanding your security controls, right? So once you have identified all your non-negotiables, you start moving on your security controls. What are your defensive security controls? What are your preventive security controls? And what are your responsive security controls? Now, specifically for executives, if you see, they are always moving. They are going from talking about M&As, going and meetings investors, doing demos, talking to lot of people, right? So they will need a different set of sort of a controls in place, right? Because they are in movement, they are moving along with the devices. uh, the kind of responsive controls that you will need for them would be much higher, right? And you need to have like a team who is looking continuously at them. It can't be like security can't be a point in time, right? You need to continuously monitor and see what is really ongoing. And if there is a team who can sort of handle any sort of an incident or any sort of a immediate action. Let's take a simple scenario, like the executive team might be doing a demo to someone out there with some fancy thing and some product demo and all, right? And they may need a lot of flexibility in terms of connecting to some SDMI and all that, right? So once you start putting security perspective to it, the IT controls, the proactive controls, the security controls, the compliance controls comes into picture. So that is where you need to basically start taking decisions and start taking hard calls and start identifying what are your non-negotiables, right? And at that circumstances, your non-negotiable come into picture, right? So and once you have defined all of that, that becomes very simple what you can do and what you cannot do, right? And how do you basically ensure in that journey also for all these executives, all the security controls are already in place and are practically being looked upon by all the security teams out there, right? So I think this is my view that you need to obviously have a higher security control for your executives, but the kind of reactive controls which is going to be implemented for all your executives will be much higher than all your employees.
Understand your security controls. Thank you, gentlemen, for this lovely, lovely discussion. And the overwhelming feeling is that we need to have a differentiated strategy as far as various groups of employees are concerned. And of course, the criticality of cybersecurity, which is going to increase even more in the days to come as we see an explosion, an exponential explosion in the number of devices, in the amount of data that is being generated. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. It's been a lovely, lovely discussion today.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.